Welcome to Matner Movie Musings. My name is Scott Matner, and this week we'll be reviewing four new movies recently released to theaters. Now, January isn't really known to be a month of great movies. In fact, it's more to the contrary. As the studios release their Oscar hopefuls in wider into theaters, they also sneak out some of their lesser projects that they lack any faith in or aren't going to be any good. They're essentially just releasing their garbage, so to speak. And certainly a few of the reviews this week will testify to that. And namely the first one, which is The Grudge, a reboot of the 2004 original, which in itself was a remake of a Japanese film, Ju-on. Now, I was not a fan of any of those films, including Grudge 2, which followed later. I found them to be boring and slow and tedious, and most importantly, not scary. And certainly is the case with this latest version. Although I have to admit my hopes were up, and I was a bit excited, namely for the director, Nicholas Pess. His previous films certainly intrigued me, including his debut film, The Eyes of My Mother, which was a unforgettable, it was a very creepy black and white art house horror film filled with unforgettable images that I still remember to this day. And then last year's Piercing, which was an incredibly exhilarating experience. Once again, with unforgettable imagery and visual storytelling, compelling visual storytelling. It was essentially 70s grindhouse trash polished up into 21st century pulp fiction. And it was a very exciting film, and I was really looking forward to what he would do next. And when I heard he was going to be doing this film, I had mixed reactions, mostly because I was not excited for the material, but I was excited to see what he might do with it. Sadly, he seems to be just a hired hand here, not really bringing much of his directorial style or visual eye to this film. That really the only thing he seems to have contributed is some frenetic editing and some energized visuals, but they don't bring anything to the material. For one reason or another, he's decided to chop up the timeline, so the movie skips back and forth through time, showing us one character in the present, and then other characters in the past, and then back and forth, so on and so forth, to where the movie just becomes a confusing mess. It's more of a series of connected vignettes as opposed to one full story. And not that it matters, even if the film had told its story chronologically, the film still offers no scares. There's not really anything of interest here. It's just another ghost story where you've got the vengeful spirit who haunts this house and latches on to the people who come in contact with it, and they all meet horrible ends. Nothing we haven't seen before countless times. It's been done since 1963's The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise, which is a classic. Ever since then, really the premise has been ripped off, and there's not really much new or exciting that can be done with it, as this movie certainly is a testament to. This is mostly just all smoke and mirrors, style without substance, and as I said, even the style is rather uninspired. So really, this is just another boring, pointless reboot of an already tired horror premise, and really the only victims here are those in the theater. Next, we have Underwater, which is another case of a talented director with promise. given a tired and routine Hollywood formula picture and expected to rejuvenate it with their fresh take and skills. This time, that director is William Eubank, whose 2014 film The Signal was a refreshing, intelligent sci-fi thriller starring Lawrence Fishburne that really gave us a different take and was really a very unique science fiction picture. Unfortunately, Underwater is the exact opposite. While not nearly as dreadful as The Grudge, Underwater does completely waste his talents, giving him nothing to do but go through the motions of this tired story, which is essentially a remake or reimagining of Alien, which just turned 40 last year, which shows you the level of imagination that the filmmakers have here. And actually, this doesn't even can't even claim that credit as such, as it's more of a remake of or a copy of a copy. Whereas movies like Leviathan and Deep Rising, that were already copies of Alien, essentially set underwater, which is obviously what this film is. It's just simply the story of a bunch of scientists underwater who, after an earthquake, their vessel is in danger of filling with water, and so they must try to save themselves. And as they venture out of their underwater subterranean science lab, they come in contact with a strange alien creature. And of course, this is done one by one. They don't all go out together. That would be crazy. Of course, they just go one by one as they are all come in contact with this creature. That is essentially the film. There's a little more to it, obviously, to stretch out to the 90-minute running time. But the characters are all stereotypes, and there really isn't anything of interest here. The most interesting thing, as was the case with November's Charlie's Angels, is Kristen Stewart, who gives another interesting performance, another complex performance, in an attempt to elevate the otherwise troubled and mundane material that she finds herself trapped in. I She's like the woman who dates bad guys in an attempt to change them or fix them, and of course that never works. I would give her the same advice that her girlfriends would give her in that situation. Don't waste your time. Just pick a different project. And that would be the same advice I would give to you. Don't waste your time on this film. Definitely pick a different movie. However, whatever you do, just do not choose our next film like a boss. The new comedy starring Rose Byrne from such apatow comedies as Bridesmaids and Neighbors, and Tiffany Haddish from the hilarious Girls Trip and the So-So Night School. The actresses play friends who own their own beauty business, however, have come upon some financial hardship, and they find salvation in the form of a very successful fashion icon played by Salma Hayek, who comes in like a savior, wanting to invest in their company, while secretly she has devious plans to completely take over the company. And in order to do so, she begins to pit the friends against each other. And tired cliches abound as the women fight, make up, and of course learn life lessons and the power of friendship. It's a very tired formula, and both actresses are completely wasted. Although Byrne feels a little more comfortable in this material, while Haddish is completely out at sea. She's basically playing a neutered version of herself, very tired down version of her normal, feisty, nasty self that we've seen in movies like Girls Trip, and she seems to never have been able to get back to that level on screen as she was in that film, and she is in her stand-up. And this film basically just treats her as the token tough black chick, which is a shame because she's a very talented actress and a very intelligent comedian, and I would love to see her in a film that focuses on her and her talents. But this film has much more problems than its treatment of Haddish. It's just a tired, predictable plot, stale, obvious humor. We feel more embarrassed for these actresses than anything else, and this is such a disappointment from Miguel Arteta, director Miguel Arteta, who's made such clever offbeat comedies as Cedar Rapids and Youth in Revolt, and none of that comes across here. In fact, his previous film, Dinner with Beatrice, was an especially sharp and observant comedy that actually dealt straight and intelligently with racial tensions and class struggles. Some of the material that this film tries to grapple with fails miserably, and because Like a Boss is just a shallow shadow of that film, with similar ideas but much lower standards. And unless you share those lower standards, I would advise to skip this film. Next, we have 1917, and here we finally have a winner. Literally, this is the film that won the Best Dramatic Picture at last Sunday's Golden Globes. 1917 is indeed one of the best films of 2019. It's a thrilling, exciting, emotionally powerful film, and it tells the story of two British soldiers during World War One, who are on a life or death mission to deliver important, time-sensitive information to the front lines regarding the change of position of the Germans' army. And most of the publicity surrounding this film has been about the fact that the film was made to appear as if it was filmed all in one shot, one take, all shot in one take. And that is an important element to the film, but it is more than a gimmick. Of course, this type of thing has been done before, as far back as in Hitchcock's Rope, and in 2002's Russian Ark. And in both cases, the trick was more important than the movie itself. It became kind of a game to try to spot any sort of cuts. Now, here, this is definitely not a gimmick. I will say, for the first about 10 minutes of the movie, I will admit I was, very aware that it was done in one take, and I was, trying to spot the cuts myself. But once the story got started, like I said, about 10 minutes in, I completely lost all thought of the process, and actually became very absorbed into the film and the story, and most importantly, these characters. It actually is because of that one shot use of that one shot trick, if you will, that really brings us in to the movie. It really adds urgency and importance to the events. Director Sam Mendes, who's best known for his 1999 debut American Beauty, has actually spent the last several years directing the last two James Bond pictures. And while he did bring a level of sophistication and intelligence to those films that was much needed, it is nice to have him back a little more in his element, where he's making rich character-driven period studies, such as like he did with 2002's Road to Redemption and 2008's Revol- uh, Revolutionary Road. And like those films, this film tells a a small character story within a bigger scope. Um, and this scope here, of course, being World War One. But this isn't like any other war film that I've ever seen, and none that I'm aware of. It really kind of zeroes in, like I said, on these two individual soldiers. While there is a war going on around them, um, the story is really about the soldiers, not the war, which is really the case with with most war films. If you think about it, we tend to follow one or two or a group of soldiers, and the film is really about their relationships and about the characters. Um, but as always is the case with most war films, there's always the battle. There's always the sense of the grander picture going on around them. And while there are hints of that here, the film we really by filming it in seemingly in one take and taking us side by side with these soldiers, we feel like we're in battle with them. We're in this war. We feel the hopelessness and the loneliness and the need for companionship that these soldiers must feel during this time. So we really get into the mind and spirit, of the soldier during wartime, um, and that's really the genius of 1917 is that it really gets down to the bare bones of war film and a story about war by just focusing on the most bare minimum of elements of the war, and that is the soldier himself. And so, as a film about these characters, as a film about war, this is one of the best films of 1917, and the fact that it seems to be filmed in one shot just only adds to that experience. And that will do it for this week's Matinee Movie Musings. And thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.